Welcome to the IP2 podcast. I'm Shea Ashby, and as always, I'm joined by Felix Chung. Today, we are joined by Klaus Lassacher.
Klaus has officially been the Judge Program Manager for LSS for around 1 year, but he has been an integral part of the Judge Program for Flesh and Blood since 2021. He is an experienced TCG judge, and he has traveled all around the world with over 150 events under his belt, including numerous lead roles. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, happy to be here.
Klaus, can you give us a little bit of information about yourself, your background in games, or whatever you want to share with our listeners?
Sure. As mentioned, I'm doing TCGs since some time now, and I think I started playing the first one when over 20 years ago, when I started playing Magic back in the days. I think it was 2002, something like that. And since then, it was a little bit of on and off with TCGs, always board games, always other games. But at some point when I moved to Vienna, it was the TCG looks nice. And at some point judging started. And then, the slippery slope basically just gradually continued.
Nice. So are you a gamer by nature? Do you play all types of games, like board games, video games, other TCGs?
Yeah, it's basically mainly started out with a little bit of video games, back in the days from the original Game Boy to up to when you start with Windows, some racing games. Later, basically got a fable for strategy games like Command and Conquer, Anno, and board games. When I had a group, usually always, basically a little bit more the Game of Thrones board game, Junta, a little bit the more complex ones. But that basically has always been there. And then at some point the TCGs hit it and they really took it away from me.
Nice. I've spent many hours playing Command and Conquer Red Alert.
So yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. Is there anything other important or interesting facts that you'd like to let people know about you?
I find a quirky one is I originally learned laboratory skills, so microbiology, chemistry, and then was what do I do with this? I started studying political science, so actually I have a degree in political science, and then somehow ended up on international gaming shows. So it's always the world takes you to weird places and all around.
You ended up on international gaming shows?
Basically when I at some point be the local small pond of TCGs is not big enough, then you go at some, Comic-Con kind of event, and then you'd be this is nice. And then, it keeps rolling.
Well, I mean, being a judge in TCGs must draw on, there's the scientific part, understanding the rules, but then political science, this is political science almost. There's different nations that may be at odds and have different interpretations.
When you start as judge, you usually do it in your home pond. If it's German speaking region for me, your first event in Germany or in Prague, that's fairly homogeneous. And yes, in Europe you're always with different cultures. But the first time I remember going to a show to the US, I did not know anybody. I just took a flight to the US, and that's the stage when it gets really interesting, when you actively step out of your comfort zone a lot. And that was for me the first one, this is different.
What was that experience like the first time that you flew to the US, just kind of willy-nilly, I guess?
It's the thing, obviously what people tell you about the US before, just in general, and then what judges tell you about, those US judges, they rule those things differently, or, they do that differently. And, you have these expectations that other people set. And then when you're there, you're actually able to make yourself an impression what it's actually like, and not just the hearsay from before.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. And nowadays, before we delve deeper into the world of judging, is your current role with LSS a full-time role for you, or do you have another job right now, or are you still studying? What is that for you?
So it's basically full-time. I do some shows on the side that I technically don't need to do, but like to do to get in touch with the community. I technically am still enrolled into studying in my master's, but that, to be honest, the last year didn't do that much. But I'm basically considering trying to finish it. But yeah, the shows and mainly the work takes a lot of time, and it's the trying to settle in. And after a year, I'm slowly getting the ropes of it, and it gets better.
Got it. Well, that does sound like a lot to juggle. And before we move on, sorry, it's very interesting stuff here. You mentioned you live in Vienna right now?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's really cool. What's the gaming scene like in Vienna? I mean, for myself, I only have the scene in North America, in my own province in Canada, really to draw on. Like, is there anything interesting about, like, how accessible is it to get cards? Like, be it Magic back in the day, or even Flesh and Blood now. Like, what's the culture like?
I mean, it's in Vienna. The city itself has like three now established stores. Like one that was like there forever, and that's basically every card game. Some card games that comes out, they will have it, as they had Flesh and Blood very early. Then there's like one, that's the more generalized, average gaming store, but super fancy. One was like just Magic for like 25 years, basically the hardcore, sworn in family, super relaxed. And then we got like the kind of competitive, this high-end card shop, like a little bit more serious. But by now, I think in the city we now have 4 TCG stores, where 3 do Flesh and Blood. And if you get like half an hour into a train or car, you have like 4 or 5 more TCG stores, and I think 2 of them outside do Flesh and Blood. So basically, it is pretty good and pretty nice. It is mainly the what type of community you would like to be with, because they all have a different flair, a little bit of different vibe, and that's pretty nice as a player. You can find your spot and your kind of thing you want to have.
No, that's really cool. One thing that I've heard of in a lot of, especially these very historical European cities like Vienna, is perhaps that people in North America take space for granted. Like, it's easy for someone to find a strip mall in the middle of a suburb somewhere and start a gaming store. And you can get 2,000 square feet, and it's not going to be that expensive. But when I think about a city like Vienna, that's older, it has a lot of history, a lot of historical buildings. I mean, is that a factor in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. And it is also with some games when it comes to the premier store qualifications, it's also a problem, because
Mm.
sometimes they're like, you need X seats. Like one store
Yeah.
has conveniently, what is it, 36 players, or like 42 if they go super tight. The big one had 130, but they scaled down to 90, and that's like the biggest one. And like
Mhm.
one that had a lot of space is like literally in a former factory, and they basically were like, oh, we are half an hour drive outside of the city in the middle of nowhere, here's space.
Yeah, I mean, Europe does a lot of things right when it comes to, very beautiful historic cities, and a lot of people living very efficiently and in all these, these high density
You
areas.
mean
But
mixed zoning laws?
that's right. But yeah, at the same time, it means probably hard to just plop in a new LGS wherever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that's really
most
interesting.
most really start off as some people trading in somebody's flat, and then they get a small place, and then they grow. So it's usually
Okay.
a, hey, this works
Interesting.
out, let's get a better one. Like that was like the last one that actually popped up. They moved 3 times in 5 years to actually now have a proper store with like 64 seats.
Mhm.
And the other
Nice.
ones, the other 2 ones have been there for in the current location since like 15 years or something. So yeah, it's hard to get a good space that you can afford rent, basically.
Thank you so much for helping us understand a little bit more what it's like where you live. I guess our next topic will be what it was like being a traveling judge prior to Flesh and Blood. I think I read somewhere, yeah, you have over 150 events that you've attended as a judge. So just start from the beginning. Like, how did you get started judging? Like, what drew you to being a judge?
I mean, I always say with judging, it's the before the pandemic and the after pandemic life, because that had impacted it a lot. But at the beginning, I think, what was I certified as a Magic judge in 2016, both L1 and 2. And it's this kind of thing, you hook up with the community. They'd be like, hey, want to come to this international judge conference over in Germany? We put 5 people in the car, you drive 8 hours. That's fairly unusual for Europe. And be like, meet 100 people that you've never seen in your life. And
Mhm.
being like, you play like vintage cube till like 1 a.m., or you do whatever. Like, you basically, you get exposed to things that basically you want to have more, like his convention fever kind of style. And I remember then that in 2017 I got my first international big show in Prague, where I was basically judging, and that basically kicked it off for me and was like, oh, this is really nice. Let's apply for more. And then I think my third big show, due to the recommendation of my mentor, I did in the US, and then I was like, ooh, I can also travel and meet even more people. So it's it's these factors of the shows are nice, you meet new people, but you can also travel, and that basically, I think 2017 I did 4 shows, like Grand Prix back then, and like 2018 I did already like 19 or 20 of them. So for me, I didn't do the usual, you get eased in a bit. I very much scaled up very quickly, and that's a bit unique what I did. But it got me, and it basically went and got more till the pandemic hit, and then it was this, just let's say telling your friends in like Lyon, hey, see you next weekend in Sao Paulo. And that moment came only 2.5 years later. And that was like the first real speed bump on the way.
Right.
But yeah, a slippery road, I would say.
Yeah. It sounds like it really reeled you in once you had your first bite. It's easy to, just have so much fun with the people that you drive with and then you meet and you want to meet more and more people. What led to you making that first bite though? Like, was there a need for judges within your community? Like, were there just not enough?
Basically, back then in the days, Magic It Assistant is comparable to ProQuest, just a little bit lighter with the PPTQs. And they required an L2 judge. So my local mentor was like, get your shit together, get L2, we need another person. And then I'd be like, travel the country, and basically it would be comparable to like if I would do in one ProQuest season, like each weekend, each Saturday and each Sunday, a different ProQuest in a different city. So it basically ended up there's a 3 or 4 weeks season, and I will do something each of the days, or at least one of the days. And it was like really grindy, the not so healthy kind of grindy. But that got me hooked on the challenge and got me hooked on like the community. So that's how I basically got a little bit pushed into the deep water kind of thing. And that also helped me pretty quickly to learn a lot. With also the one big store in Vienna, when you have like a pre-release with 140 people, you are able to learn a lot of skills that you don't learn in a shop with 30 people. And that basically kicked it off and also gave me a very good foundation to basically start off and be like, hey, this is my start of my judge quote career, and go from there.
Going back to you traveling to cities for judging, were you going home at the end of each event, or were you staying in hotels and just hopping from city to city because they kept going out farther and farther from your place of residence?
So in the beginning, I had like regularly 3 weeks trip. For example, as a judge from Europe that just got floor judge, if you travel to the US, having one show was very tricky money-wise, because like I was able to get flights to the East Coast for like $300, but those times are over. And basically you needed to chain 2 events together and basically be like, oh, there's a show in Toronto, and the next day you go down, or the next day on Monday you go down to DC. On the way you maybe look at like some nice waterfalls on the way. And that's basically how I think the worst one before the pandemic was a 5-week trip, but usually like maximum 2. In Europe, there were never so many events, but in the US, you could do Gen Con into something else, into some random SEG thing. Like there, the grind factor was very much given.
Wow. And while you were doing all these things, like you said, in 2016, 2017, all the way up until COVID, essentially, were you doing this as like a hobby, like a side gig, while you were also doing the school that you were talking about, or how did that work?
Basically, I did it in a way that all my lessons at university were like Tuesday night and Wednesday, that I basically could fly out on a Thursday to the US and be Tuesday morning back from the US.
Wow.
And it was like tricky where like, uni progressed, but not as much, where basically COVID with like distance learning and other things, I finished my degree during COVID, and COVID did give the push to finish that, because otherwise I like judging a lot and was like, do I want to write a seminar paper, or do I want to be right now in Japan for like 2 weeks? And usually Japan won, like comparable to the university. But yeah, it was this mix of, I tried, I was maybe not as good at trying, but judging was kind of the, also income wise, what I tried to be the main income, but judging as a main source of income is tricky if not done proper. Let's phrase it that way.
no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it sounds like you really structured everything in your life as well, with organizing your lessons to be on Tuesdays and Wednesdays to support that as well. So no, that's pretty smart. What lessons did you learn from all this time hitting so many events? Like, if you could just pass on some words of wisdom from all this time spent on the road and doing these 3-week, 4-week, 5-week trips to maybe some younger judges or people thinking about being judges, what would you pass on to them?
Be cheap but be efficient, and comfort is important. Like always staying in a in a hostel room with 8 people, or taking a Flixbus or like Greyhound equivalent to
Mm.
like the other side of the continent is not the healthiest thing if you want to do it in a long-term thing, because it would literally just kill you. And just still have time for yourself. Like I did it a lot, didn't have a relationship back then in the start, and that makes life easier. But basically, having still you time and still having something that feels like it's your home, to just have a place of always going back to, like that. I did not have that much for some time, but at some point I valued being more at home, enjoying it, but yet still enjoying people. And I think the cheap but enjoy travel, but also enjoy home.
Yeah. And I mean, you've talked about so many interesting places, including Japan, the US, etc. Like, I guess if you could pick a top or most interesting or most memorable event from your time living this kind of life, what would that be?
Whew, most interesting. Place wise, Asia and especially Japan is pretty high on the list, as well as Brazil. But event wise specific, I mean, before the pandemic, the Vegas events were always insanely big, like
Mm.
several, like 4,000 people or something. But some
Wow.
specific one, I think my first Japanese event does rank pretty high on the I will remember this. But one was otherwise sitting in Brisbane in Australia after my shift on a sand beach of a pool, at there's like a bar at like 11 p.m. after the show, being like on the other fucking side of the world. Sorry for swearing.
It's okay.
I'm on the other side of the world, sitting in a pool at 11 p.m. after a show. Like this is like something like that hits different, and especially the next day having a flight to New Zealand and going to like all the Lord of the Ring things. Like that was like one of the moments where I was like, "Yep, this is pretty nice."
That sounds pretty amazing. I'd like to jump into Fab, and I was just kind of wondering what made you look into the game, and further to that, was it kind of natural at the point when you picked up the game for you to be the local judge for the area whenever an event needed, like for RTNs or PQs, whenever you got into it?
Uh, I mean, as I mentioned before, like this big shift with the pandemic, because like after the pandemic, things starting up took a long time. Like like in
Hmm.
Europe, it was like 2022, in the US 2021. So basically, at some point when the locals were like, "Hey, this is new card game, we would need a judge for nationals," kind of thing. Before that, I remember sending an email to LSS and be like, "Hey, I would like to be a judge," and I got back a generic email telling me, "Oh, there's no official judge program yet, but I will get an email if there is one." So there was
Hmm.
basically nothing. And I remember the first nationals back in 2020. Now was it 2021? Yeah, 2021 had nationals, where it was like the store can recommend you for the judge test. Like that was
Yep.
the official, like hey, an official test. And before that, it was like some people make a Facebook group, some people make something, and like it exists kind of thing. And the nationals was the first thing where we were like, "Hey, we're 3 judges, we band together, we actually look more look more at the rules with the documents we had back then." And that was the first step. And then kind of the like up to, I would say, with the US shows, the first ones that happened with Vegas, and later I did Cincinnati and Fort Worth. Like that one, I think was the start when it also felt that they're gonna be some kind of community, because before that there was no official platform. There was like a random Facebook group maybe, and I
Yep.
think that's when it pulled me more in. Where it was like it got this dynamic of, this is something new. We can create something. Conferences, what I did, what I started off, and having this sense of ownership and basically being like, "Hey, we can make something new here," was very intriguing. Also, the rules were not perfect. You could give input on that. And when Josh back in the days got hired, and he listened to the feedback and be like, hey, this makes sense. And having somebody, having a company that listens to you and doesn't just disregard you, this then additionally gave this feeling of like, hey, this can become something nice. And well, it went from there.
I was just trying to think of the timeline from when I got the original email from LSS to become a level 1 judge for RTNs. It was RTNs.
Yeah.
I don't think the Discord existed back then, or it
Yeah,
was
like,
very new. We weren't really
yeah.
using it the same way that we use it today.
I'm looking at my emails, so because I want to actually look up when I got the emails from FAB TCG. Let me see. My first email is the 10th of May 2021, and I think I asked to be a judge, and what did I get? Thanks for getting in touch. In regards of becoming a qualified judge, the program is coming, and we hope to have it together for 2021. In the interim, we recommend the following: signing the official rules page. That was the thing.
Right.
The Facebook rules page, and reading up on the rules. And we're strongly recommending you reading the release notes. And that's what basically got back from LSS. And then the road to nationals in July 2021. And that was the first more where stuff got moving. I got my test 3 days later. So yeah, I tested July 2021 for my level 1. Long time.
Nice. Yeah. So what were your initial impressions of the Flesh and Blood judging community and the program, or I guess lack of program, when you first joined?
I think lack of program defines it a lot, where with different judges from different TCGs, we had a Digimon judge, we had 2 Pokemon judges, and Magic judges. I think it was more this, everybody kind of looks at the game and goes kind of looks interesting. Rules were kind of wonky, because if you look back then, 2021, at the rules book, there were some pretty big holes in that.
Mm-hmm.
And the penalty guidelines were oh, you upgrade this penalty. And it never again mentions anything about an upgrade in the whole document. Right. And, we were looks promising, but, maybe they want help kind of thing. It was more as, you tip your toe into the water and be like, hey, what gets? And as mentioned, I think when Channel Fireball did the first shows in the US, and they were the first people actually traveling to a show, I think that's when the first sense of community came up, where you saw the people that actually learned the game and cared, and the people that just were the tourists and basically applied Pokemon, Magic, or whatever policy. And I think that was the point when it started, that it, showed who was invested and who was willing to invest and who was not. And I think that's the first instance of community actually, something resembles that.
Okay.
Was there something about Flesh and Blood in particular that drew you into Flesh and Blood specifically? Because I remember 2021 as well, early 2021, and that was the Wild West. There's 20 different TCGs coming out, all promising to make you a millionaire, and I couldn't separate one thing from another. Why FAB in particular?
I mean, I think it was this mixture of if you look at Dragon Ball or One Piece, it always feels they come up and 2 years later nobody cares again. And I do need to say it was intriguing when somebody tells you card game, New Zealand, no big company, what's going on here? It did give this, something is different here. And basically one thing that also helped is nobody else did events, almost nobody. And it was hey, there is something. It feels like you get heard. It feels like there's something happening. And I think that was also an original push where a lot of judges went in. And for example, when other card games booted up again, Pokemon started a regional circle again, and Magic did some shows where some people just, flocked away again because what they had before came back, and other people were no, this is kind of nice, let's stay. And I think that was the mix that just made this a thing.
So what made you decide to devote more time and energy to FAB compared to, say, Magic?
I mean, for a long time, it was the thing that happened, the thing where something, you, as mentioned, the feeling of you could contribute. Mm-hmm. And that's something that in other card games, you got the answer of, oh no, this is 3 people running this judge program and you can do nothing. To you can feel you contribute. And when I started the conferences pretty early, actually, most likely 2021, I think did the first one, because I love doing conferences in Magic. Because for me, it's not only the education, it's also this the community coming together, the community doing things, like feeling as something, and yes, having the education, but still. And I think that's something that I started missing from Magic, because with Magic having had a very big shift in the judge community before the pandemic, and this kind of thing went away. And I remember hosting a conference for Magic in 2021, and almost nobody showed up. And then some people
Right.
like when I did online conferences were like just like complaining, where are my foils, where's my value? And in FAB you didn't have that. You didn't get promos for conferences, you just did them, and people showed up and people enjoyed it. And this kind of community spirit and stuff, like that's something where I was like, oh, people value this. They don't do this for sitting brain dead there for 4 hours and getting a pack of foils. And that's something that I had missed in Magic, and that Flesh and Blood basically gave me pretty early on.
One of the things I noticed about Flesh and Blood right from the start, and you've kind of mentioned it a few times, it has a more personal feel to it than I think some of the more corporate-driven TCGs. Like you said, you're able to contact LSS and get a response from a real person. Seeing suggestions from some of the surveys that they sent out, you can actually see the change that they're trying to make. And I know I, for one, that's part of what draws me to the game, and it kind of feels sort of the same for you as well, that you as an individual can be heard and responded to, and there's something that feels really, really good about that, and feels like you're kind of part of a small family at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Monarch came out, and people like overbought it, scalpers got it got expensive. Then Tales of Aria was kind of the overshoot, and it was like price wise like nothing.
Yep.
And I remember in the days, James making like a post about it, and acknowledging that this is happening. And when you look at other games where it's like, oh no, you the player base is wrong not wanting this, or just no comment. And this, there being a response back in the days from LSS being like, oh yeah, no, we didn't do that great, and we acknowledge that, and we're gonna address this, and this way. Or if it's when they short printed the one card, and like half a year later there was this, oh, there's a solution for this. And as you said, it feels like you're getting heard, and it doesn't feel like you're shouting in a void and nobody ever listens. And that, back in the days as judge already, gave a nice feeling, and especially when later Josh got in and basically kind of started the judge program, the proper L1 test and everything, like where also you could write him input. And I remember cornering him at the first Pro Day in New Jersey, going to the Outback Steakhouse, putting him in a corner, 7 people or 6, and be like, we want to help you.
Yeah.
You don't need to do this alone, but you need to accept our help. And that's like how things like the exam group started off and other things. And where Josh was also, yes, please tell me and help me how we should run this. And that's was like took its ways.
That's awesome to hear. I actually never heard that story before. Like one of the things that speaks to me as a player and in someone that wants to be a part of the game is that LSS is willing to admit mistakes. Like you said, they come out and they say, "Hey, we screwed up," or "Here's a solution for something that we're working on." I, for one, and I know a lot of people locally here, that speaks volumes to the direction of the company and how they internalize things that aren't going well. And I find you'll always get more respect from the community when you come out and admit you made a mistake, or say that you're working on something and you're not just, again, a faceless corporate aberration that's just trying to suck all of the money out of our wallets, right? That's, again, another thing that keeps me to the game. But I really enjoy that you were able to like tackle Josh Scott into the corner of a restaurant and be like, here, we're going to force our help on you.
I remember it was the show where like most of us met the first time, like James White in person, and also Josh. And I remember Josh out in the big world, and like his first big event, and I think it was a pretty overwhelming experience for him in a good way, and basically also getting in contact with judges and being like, hey, that's what people think. They tell you, they don't gonna be like sugar coated in 20 layers. They like actually tell you in the face and be like, hey, we need to fix this, we need to do this. And that, I think, it was also a very good boost for what shaped up to be the judge program.
So is that how your position of judge program manager started? You cornered Josh Scott and you with a gang of thugs
just told him
Outback and forced him to...
I mean, there were some people like Joe Kavanagh Ward Warren, Amanda Coots, and like some other people that were involved pretty early that were like trying to like help him. I remember at some point in when was it? June last year, I get a message. So what are you actually doing for a job? And I write like, oh, I'm student and judging. Nothing anymore for like, a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, like 11:45 in the evening, so are you interested in a job? And I'm like, let's talk. So it was this kind of thing of, doing conferences, having organized a lot there, being around a lot, giving input. And so it also, what it did form up early is like the moderator group of the Discord, the original one, basically were the more active people. And I was in that group. And yeah, from there it went. And at some point I got asked. And it was this, very much like, let's have a Discord chat and let's figure out what this is about. And then, it went from there.
No, that's great. I mean, at that point in your life, were you looking for something a little bit different than continuing to, go from show to show, judging and all of that?
I mean, it was basically when 2021, I started a job at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, realized, God, this is garbage. I don't want to do this. Basically jumped right back. Like, that's a reason why I didn't do Vegas back then, because I was still doing the job. I basically canceled the job and I went on a 7-week judge trip. I went like 3 weeks to South America, went in, and that was the feeling where I was like, I really like this. But the thing of, okay, let's make a company, let's make this professional, like do it proper, like get insurance, I was like, let's do this decent. And, in a way I enjoy, but proper. And then at some point when the offer came around, I was like, this is the thing I like. This is an opportunity to shape something, to own something. And then it also gave me still some flexibility where it was like, hey, can I still do shows? Can I still, go out and do the things I enjoy? And with the answer being mostly yes, I basically was like, yep, this fits pretty neatly in what I want. Because basically the pandemic and the job afterwards showed me like the things I don't want. Right. And that helped me being like, I want to do something with shows. And that just neatly fit in like, like a perfect Tetris block when you need a line piece and be like, don't know what's missing in my life, but then this comes along and you're like, yep, this fits pretty well.
No, that's awesome. Can you just tell us, and I would imagine many people actually don't know that, the position of judge program manager even exists. Could you just let us know what are the responsibilities of that position and yourself?
So basically, Josh is the rules and policy manager. So that's fairly straightforward. I'm basically everything that's needed to run a judge program, from the communications, testing, that the show staffing works out for callings, but everything down to like the player conduct committee or the judge conduct committee. Like, I have a committee with a judge head of it, but I'm still the one that needs to organize it, needs to run it. So basically everything that touches a show, touches a road to national, everything judge-wise, basically I'm the one that needs to keep it running. Obviously not alone with my resources, but Josh does the documents, organized play, does a lot of things with ProQuest and road to nationals. But if it comes to like, hey, do we want to do change this in the judge gifts, or do we want to do this policy-wise for judges, or hey, we need this article to the judges understand how things work. Basically, the whole globe of everything that events just run smooth. And, nobody goes on Reddit, burns an event down, and, people are sad. And because judges touch everything from customer service, things from you pay at the counter to you get your ruling on a table, and that somebody wants to come back, is basically all dependent on judges. Sure, the rules need to be decent, the policy needs to make sense, but carrying that over into into the flesh and blood, to basically quote it, that's the thing where that's my responsibility, that works smoothly.
So I'm curious, how closely do you work with Josh or the OP team, or is there other teams at LSS that you work closely with?
So basically, I would say the three, Josh is the one I gonna usually at least once a week, more often have a meeting. On rules, I'm not that much of a rules savvy person, so that's his pond. but
Yep.
policy, like when we talked about removing IP3, or if we talked about the new trigger fix, like that's things we talk about. Where like I put also my input in, like for judging games for years, where like sometimes it's a word like if a player potentially made decisions, like where I'm like aware that alone adding the word potentially can cause you problems, or like how team trios work. So I'm giving my input there from like having like the knowledge over the years. So that's basically where then also Josh basically still gonna write the documents, implement them, and also he's the one that's gonna plan a bit more ahead.
Yep.
And otherwise, on like important decision on the judge program or in general, like we talk over the things, and I'm like, hey, I want to do this and this. That sounds good. And it's he's also my voice of reasoning, or basically my voice of sanity, that I talk with him and be like, hey, I want to do those steps now. Otherwise, OP, like with Premier OP and OP, and OP is like mainly like the running the pro quests, running the road to nationals, like having we have an issue with a store. Can we get some input? And I'm gonna ask some judges.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is Premier OP when it comes to like callings, worlds, pro tour. Like which judges do we take? What are the needs of the event? Like, hey, this is now a event with multi-format, and I'm going to be like, hey, we need more judges. And that's my interactions like with mostly, and that's like obviously some other things that come up, but that's like my most interactions are with those people.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned before you're located in Vienna, but most of LSS is located, I think, literally across the world from you.
There is no other place further away than New Zealand.
Yeah. So, I mean, how does that team dynamic work with that arrangement?
I mean, I remember when Josh got me onboarded, and he told me what James said. So where does that guy live again? Because Josh was like telling him like, oh, about this calling and that calling. So it was kind of the the running joke. Then where do I actually live?
Yeah.
It depends a bit if it's winter or summer, because winter it's 12-hour time difference. My winter, and now it's 10 hours. So for example, a 9 a.m. morning meeting in New Zealand is my 11 p.m. on Sunday. So right. If there's a meetings, they're usually gonna be late for me, like 11 midnight, where like that was expected from the start. Mm-hmm. It gets quirky if you want to then add somebody from the US into a meeting, because then your times get way less. And basically, it's the expectation of being available for meetings, but the rest is very flexible. Like I couldn't, like, if I have my meetings till like 1 a.m., go to sleep for 6 hours, then it's already like 9 a.m. here, is already 7 p.m. New Zealand. So, if I just sleep, the workday, they're going to be over. And so it's this having a workflow that based on communication and basically me knowing when things need to be there, and then making meetings when they need to be, and not trying to have useless meetings, every day, 5 hours, because that would just grind me. Yeah. It was tricky in the beginning, but I think now it's the, it is Thursday night here, means it's Friday morning New Zealand. If I wake up on a Friday morning, it's already weekend for them. Right. And so like this is like where like my work week kind of never really ends, because it's community work. But if it comes to like meetings and other things, it's like for me Sunday night 11 p.m. to basically Thursday night is like where it's like there's stuff more actively happening. Right. And that's like a little bit, just shifted to what normal people would have. Mm-hmm. And I was always a late night person, so that very much helps.
Yeah, I'm a late night person. That sounds totally fine by me too. So that works for me. Shifting gears a little bit, for those that may be new to competitive card games like FAB, can you tell us why judges are important outside of just rules clarification questions?
I always like to, I have a good presentation I made years ago, and it's about judge calls and customer service is the title of the presentation.
Okay.
Because basically, like, as mentioned before a bit, it's if somebody wants to come back to an event, gotta hang on a lot of different things. Some people are gonna come in and be like, I want to play full on casual all weekend. Other people are gonna go in and be like, oh, I want to win the calling. Those people, like, you kind of need to you want them to come back, and that's basically everything from, yeah, sure, maybe it's just a rule call. Maybe it's just the where's the toilet, because that question comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of things that just basically make the picture together. But the core thing after all is still to enable that the integrity of an event works, because it should be a fair game and it should not be a rigged game. And there it's this, the judge is your friend, and you should never be afraid of calling them, because you will have people that are going to be like, if you have a judge call and, let's say somebody, attack was 5, but they only wrote down 4. They call a judge, the judge goes there and goes, oh, there's a GRV, there's going to be a warning, and goes away from the table. You will have people that are going to go like, oh my God, I got a warning. Oh my God, does my gaming career end now? And where then people will never call a judge again, because they were just confused, and the judge used a lot of words they didn't understand, because the lingo of FAB is already complicated, and if then a judge comes in, it's even more complicated. And just giving this customer service, but yet assuring that everybody has a fair game, everybody has a fair tournament, and basically getting the right balance of, we help you, but at some point we gotta also kick you out of a tournament if you're an asshole.
Right.
And basically being the friend of the player and never being seen as the enemy, unless obviously for cheaters we are the enemy. But otherwise we are your friend and helper, and some people will see us as like that police, but we are doing a lot of more things than just that, and we're there to make everybody's day better at a tournament.
Perfect. We've talked a fair bit about like the premier event side of things. What are some of the potential roles of judges in their communities outside of the direct work they do supporting tier 2 and up events?
So obviously, if it comes to community stuff, it gets very the lines get very blurry, because we have, for example, judge community representatives that kind of are there as an anchor point for the communities. Like, for example, Southeast US, Northeast, East, Europe. We have 8, I think. Asia's not a good set. Like, they're there. Like, judges can be there for shops to reach out and be like, hey, I want to run skirmish. Can you help me a bit, like how I best pull it off? Or, hey, I need a judge for my road to nationals. Can you help me find one? Like, it's basically from, sure, rules questions, but also community building, where I had this discussion last week with somebody how far the judge community and the FAB community went the last 2 years, where how should I say this? The help, the communication, the feeling of community, where judges basically can help so much if they like to be a little bit in a more public position, that stores reach out to them. But it's, how should I say, there's never a one-fits-all approach that makes it complicated, but at the same point it makes it also so beautiful, because you see how, for example, Southeast Asia are going to have a completely different approach than the west coast of the US, but both works perfectly, and it's nice seeing those things. So complicated but nice is what I would say for community.
Speaking of the judge program, can you tell me a bit more about the judge program today? Like, what is it? How can we describe it to maybe somebody that's new to the game?
I would summarize it as a club is the wrong word, but a group of people that decide that they do like the rules and they do like to apply them. And then it differentiates why people are in for it. Are they in for, I want to be the best rules person in my community? Or are they up for I really like, the challenge of logistics of big events? So I would say it is a baseline, a group of people that either like different things or find different things a challenge and they want to grow with it. And it's basically this very loose group that, sure, we're judges, but how we define that going to be a little bit more blurry.
Right. So, a question: do you know how many registered judges there are worldwide?
It's going to be somewhere. I mean, registered on Judge Hub. I need to see, the last number I pushed was a little bit out a few months ago, and we basically, the best numbers I had was at, where did I post this? This is in May. We were on 3,500 people signed up on Judge Hub.
Okay.
On 2,000 L0s, 1,300 L1s, and back then 95 L2s. But if you, for example, compare that to now, where I think we're in 120 L2s and L1s, I can tell you in a second. like it is now basically whenever you have a pro quest season or whenever there is a road to nationals, it obviously then does a pretty good growth.
Yeah.
So we now have 95 pages of this means
Quick napkin math.
94. Yep. We have now 1,400 and something L1s.
Okay.
So if we look at this compared to before, it is already
200 and some.
200 and some, basically
Yeah.
more till May. And on L2s, where we are now, L2s we have 9. So nine. That's actually, so basically there we have 130 something L2s now. So basically goes pretty nice forward.
Nice.
And obviously you need to always be in mind that a person signing up a Judge Hub can mean a lot of different things. Somebody being L1 also doesn't state much to the community involvement, and
Right.
it can range from, I'm showing up once a month at my local game store and do like a skirmish, or it can go up to I'm doing everything in my state twice a weekend. And that's like a little bit of, the involvement very much varies.
So, follow-up question: are you satisfied with the number of judges for the game, and how can you? And if you're not, how can you tell when there are enough judges?
Like, it's with the game still growing, it's a tricky thing because US or Europe has a lot of judges already, like in numbers. Where obviously, like at some point, quality is important. Like if I have on the paper 5,000 L1s, and I never actually updated my judge questions like last 3 years, it means nothing.
Right.
It's a number on a paper. So we already have ideas how we want to basically go for the future and be like, hey, how do we improve the quality of judges? Maintenance, for example, requirements that you need to judge an event. But with the game still growing, like Brazil started last year, and Brazil will soon get their first L2 because it's a natural thing. At some point you get an L2, then more recommendations. Japan is just growing. So basically, as long as I have those new regions, it is pretty tricky to change something in the metrics. So yes, I'm happy with the amount of judges, but only at the places where the game already is for some time. I definitely need more judges in Japan, in some regions in Asia, but it's this balance of, if I would say in 2 years we are worldwide everywhere and every region has a lot of judges, I will then definitely be like, quality needs to be more thing. I don't need actively more judges, but this line now, I'm not allowed to be tricked to trying to iron over everything with the same level. I basically need to acknowledge that Japan is different than the US. Brazil is different than Europe. And that makes my job also very tricky because I need to keep that in mind. What is needed where and how do I help each region the best?
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fun. And their political science comes in here.
So are there lessons that you brought in from other judge programs and incorporated them into FAB, or have you been sort of designing this from scratch with your own thoughts and needs in mind?
It's obviously what I've been growing up as a judge has played a role because obviously that's what branded me as a judge. But like I've seen the Magic Judge program undergoing some significant changes when Wizards decided to outsource it to a company. And that had very big impact on the judge community there. I have worked some Pokemon events and saw that community there as well. So there's things where like the Judge Cup on Worlds is something that Pokemon does for years, and where I got inspiration from because let's be honest, TPCI is a company with a lot of money, and you can see what can be done with a lot of money for a judge program. Obviously, that we don't have those funds is definitely a thing, but it gives me inspiration. It'd be like, those things are nice. I don't need to necessarily, here's a bunch of foils, and sometimes, here's a nice trophy for the win of this tournament, and it means a lot to judges. But the Magic Judge program has shaped me a lot. But I need to honestly say, as mentioned before, a lot of community aspects went away in Magic, and that's something that I just, as a person that grew up with it, I grew with the judge program. I grew as a person, as a judge. And that's something I want to enable judges as well in FAB. Like, sure, you're going to learn your rules and your policy, but I also want to learn your conflict management. I also want to learn how to deal with feedback, like the Vienna conference and many of those things. And that's something what I, as a judge and as a person, has learned a lot. And I want to enable that again because it will make you a better judge. but it will also make you a better human being. And basically, this combination of all shaped in the judge program, that you feel at home, it gives the things you want from it, but it also gives back, kind of.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to give you a second to brag if you want. Is there something that you've incorporated into Flesh and Blood that you're proud of, that you came up with it on yourself, or something that you took from another program but revamped it and shaped it in your own image?
I would say the conference system in FAB, because I have run a lot of conference over the last years, and I think seeing how other games either have destroyed the conferences by giving foils and value, and people just foil farm them.
Yep.
And I think the differentiation of events and what conference gives you stuff and what not, and how you apply for them, I'm pretty happy about the initial draft of that, because I very much looked at other things, how they had been or how they are right now and how they do not work due to different reasons. But that's something where I was sitting there a lot on the drawing board and be like, how does this work with the judge boosters? How do we do this? How do we reward people, but at the same time don't go overkill? And that's, I think, is a very big custom baby that I made that now obviously needs to get better and needs to, learn and evolve. But I'm pretty happy about the baseline I made there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can you also take credit for the concept of judge packs?
No, not that much. Basically, that was a long discussion because that was one of the things, like, I started last year in September. Having an original draft at the World's Conference in San Jose, was one thing. But everything with like printing stuff and logistics takes like half a year. So we were sitting together and, thought about how to make this. And the things of making it boosters did not come from me. It was somebody brought it up and I was like, I like the idea. And back in the day, we didn't know yet, if it's going to like randomized or if you just fancy pack them. But basically the idea did not come from me, but I like it because they also look very pretty.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And you mentioned you've been with LSS officially for around a year. Did you have any like key objectives for yourself starting out? Like what kind of changes you would make within a certain amount of time? Like within a year, within 2 years and all of that?
I mean, I think it started off with hey, let's get something together that I can show people that there's going to be a vision, that there's a vision, a mission, something we're going to want to work towards. And I remember when the things I presented last year at Worlds, like having the testing be revamped, having like advanced certifications, having the different projects, basically, having a judge program in general. When I presented that, I was like, hey, I have now my roadmap for the next year, because the plan was like, judge boosters around summer this year, and before that implement the rest. And I remember then in spring when I was like, I now have a PCC, I have a JCC, I have this project team on tech, I have this project team on exam. And at some point I was like, what are the next steps? And they're like, that's getting more envisioned now. But obviously it also depends a lot on what OP going to be the next years, because whatever organized play is, the judge program going to shape for the needs of it. And that's now in the phase where we are, where I'm a little bit like, my big things are like, the big things I wanted to create. And now it's this reshaping this vision, like quality of judges, like how do we improve this? And now this is like my big challenge right now, where I'm like, I need something that the judge program can work towards and people feel like this is a goal, but at the same time, phrasing that goal is not easy.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned OP next year, and we know that FAB is expanding to places like Japan, I believe. They've teased that there would even be a calling there in 2024, and that's just one example of the growth that you've been talking about, Klaus, is one of the challenges that you have and the judge program has, just to make sure that all these different regions are supported. Are there anything in the works in regards to something like translated documents or anything like that, just to help that growth into all these different areas?
Plans yet, yes, but due to basically trying to figure out the baseline first, it will be something that we're working on soon, because, like, for example, having something in Spanish already helps a lot of people. Having something in Portuguese, having something in Japanese. Like I remember back in the days for my first TCG tests, learning in English and then in German. Like it is a thing that will happen. It is more the thing of there's some other key aspects that just need to happen first,
Right.
because it's the if we now start doing it and then do not put it on good foundations, trying to shift those foundations is going to be very hard. But I know there's a lot of people that want to do it, and I'm pretty sure we will be able to get it done. I don't know when the exact timing just going to be.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, there must be a lot of competing priorities. The JCRs must do a lot of legwork in those areas to
It's
help
it's
out. Hey,
it's a thing very much. It depends where the JCRs are and what they want to do, because it's a role that's really like it's a role they can shape how they want. And I have some JCRs, like for example, Luna in Brazil. They have already translated some things. They've translated the article they just wrote for the blog, and basically different regions require different methods, and that's also a focus for me this year. Like we had a month or two ago a meeting with the JCRs of the different regions and the leads of trying to figure out like, hey, how can I in my position help your region? What does your region need? Because yes, we now have a global judge program, but I cannot dictate from above what will be good for the regions. I need to know from you. And that's the thing that I wanna improve a lot this year on, to basically be like, hey, this region it's this region it's that, and basically grow with this and work with this.
yeah. And when you say every region needs different methods, different means of communication, this is something that you've alluded to a couple times now. Does that simply mean something like people within a certain cultural group expect things a little more direct, or like what are some of those different tips that you might have for saying, different regions may require a different style?
I mean, yes, cultures themselves and how they interact is relevant. Like Asia hierarchy plays a different role, especially Japan. But one of the most important things is geography and languages. Because in Europe, like if I drive 1 hour north, I'm gonna be in the Czech Republic. If I'm driving east in an hour, I'm in Slovakia. If I'm driving a little bit further south, I'm in Hungary. And if I'm driving like 2 hours south, I'm in Slovenia. And I'm in 4 different languages in like a very short duration of time. In the US, if you're in Texas and you drive 10 hours, you're basically almost still in Texas, depending where you start. And this being aware that, like, for example, geography plays in and language of how a community grows. Like, if I make a region that is called a German-speaking region, like we have, it's gonna evolve differently than I make a region with Poland together, and I have 2 languages. But at the same point, if in Southeast Asia and you live like in Malaysia, or you're living on like one of the other islands, you're like a 2 hour apart, a 2 hour flight apart from the next judge maybe. And being aware of this, that you just need to scale it differently, and also sometimes it means like, hey, we maybe need to like make an online interview with somebody about getting them a level 2 recommendation, because otherwise they will never get it.
Mm-hmm.
And being aware that yes, there is the rules, and yes, there is the concept of how it should work, but sometimes you need to look at it differently and evaluate, okay, this does maybe not work for X, this maybe does not work for Y. And that's, I think, is the big things: language and geography. Culture, yes, also relevant, but I would say that's the third one coming in.
Thank you for sharing that insight. Not a lot of things I never really even considered would be things that you needed to think about. Currently, most people know about the differences between like a level 0, 1, and 2 judge. What other certifications and roles are in the works?
The one thing that comes up this year is the team lead certification, where basically L1 and L2 mainly focuses on policy, on rules, where the team lead certification done more on soft skills, like, hey, how do you deal with the tasks? How do you grow your team members? Basically focusing on this. The next one planned is medium event head judge, like, a battle hardened, like, hey, this is 100 to 200 players, like what you need to plan, what you need to prepare for. And the third one that's very far out and very, only sketched out is basically calling head judge to basically then for this one have like, how do you manage a team with like, 30 judges? How do you manage an event
Right.
with 1,000 people? How do you manage multi-day tournaments? But basically yes, rules and policy are important, but basically investigations, other skills, like those things are what those certifications focus on.
Yeah.
They are also, especially the later ones, not final yet, and it's still a little bit what we currently need, growing with it, and then adjusting how we go, basically. But yeah, team certification is the first one.
Okay, awesome. Some of that sounds really exciting. We had Ryan on quite a while ago discussing some of this, and when Felix and I talked to him, one of the things that we don't have a lot of experience with is that customer service side of things, where there's a player problem, and how do we do that? How do we deal with that, as well as investigations, finding out whether or not somebody is intentionally cheating or not intentionally cheating. And those are definitely skills that I lack. And so I'm really excited to hear that there's a plan for that coming in the future to help support judges that are not comfortable in those situations.
Yeah, like if you look at conferences in the beginning, 2021 and the beginning of 2022, it was a lot of basic topics because people needed to learn the basics, how to do a deck check, how to a judge call works. And now we're doing more specialized conferences that people basically learn the other things because now we have actually a foundation to build off. I remember when we talked about world stuffing because 188 people applied for worlds. And we talked about how much growth there has been in Europe since the last year because Lille, and before that was Utrecht and Madrid and Krakow. Like FAB in Europe started half a year later, and you could see how much that growth basically did.
Yeah.
And those skills now, the new ones, they gonna be more frequent, more articles. You don't need to get the certification to be able to learn them. They're gonna be seminars, but it's just gonna basically now with actually having a conference lead and being able to have more resources for it, it's gonna steadily grow from now that those things are more widely available.
Being that judges are worldwide and in different time zones, like we talked about, are those seminars going to be recorded so that somebody in a different time zone has access to them and they don't have to get up at like 2:00 in the morning to listen to them?
So time zones are a tricky thing on that, especially for the online ones. Yeah. So recording is always the problem that the after work for that is so much. Like you always need to get somebody cutting everything. It usually doesn't really happen. Is my personal experience.
Yeah.
We have, for example, the Nationals Conference series coming up in this month, and we try to adjust for time zones to give basically different people the chance to participate. And if I look at it, if I'm not blind, it's basically 2 days are catered at European evening time. So, for example, if you're in East Asia or Oceania, you can join it in the morning and basically be in Europe there or in the US, during the day. And then 2 other days are basically not really European time because they're like the US evening and then work well for Asia as well. So that's something where we try to cater for it. But one thing we also do is collect the presentations and making them available. Obviously, it's not as good as a video, but it's just the amount of work for that is a lot. Would I like it? Yes. Would I also need a handful of skilled people for video editing to do that? Yes. Right. And then, you need to cut things out if somebody doesn't want to have one thing and la-di-da. Right.
Yeah, well, we're just about to wind down a little bit here, Klaus, with a couple just broad questions here. Thank you so much for getting into those specifics. And my overall question to you is, what advice would you have for people that may be interested in judging, but they may be scared about judging because they've never tried it or they don't have a TCG background, they're not sure what it's about, and maybe not sure about how even to take the first step? Like, what would you say to people like that?
I will say it that way for myself. I have started off as a judge and always use the Murphy's Law approach. Every judge call I take will blow up. Everything I will touch will be the worst case. Why would life treat me nice? What I learned over the time is there's always other people like you. There's enough people that just started. There's enough people that will also help you and basically be I remember myself reaching out years ago to my local judges here and just the knowledge, the help that was there because yes, it's a worldwide community. Yes, it's a few thousand people, but we still feel as one community. We're judges. In this case, for Flesh and Blood. And so, like, even if you would go down and be like, hey, I'm a judge for this new game, and can you help me from X other game? The people will help you, and the people will be like, hey, this, you can do it that way, this way, or here's some tips for the first event, or hey, come judge with me. There will be always other people helping you, taking your hand and be like, hey, this is a thing. This is the thing that maybe is for you personally a thing that you will struggle with. And there, the JCRs are a great contact point, I would say, because you can reach out to them and be like, hey, I know you live in DC and I'm living in Philadelphia, but hey, do you know a judge here that I can contact? And, they maybe can judge with me. And, they will help them, get them somebody to judge with, and there will be a helping hand for those people. So if anybody comes and thinks, hey, this is maybe too big for me, I've been there as well, and most judges have been there as well, and people are there to help you.
There was a question I thought about a little while ago and I kind of forgot about it until now. And you had said community just in your last response here. How do you keep the judge program worldwide feel like a community? You have, like you said, you've had so many people with different backgrounds and experiences. I can't imagine it's an easy thing to do, but how do you go about kind of keeping like a tight group?
Like at one point, obviously, it's the game itself gives identity already. The games, the rules, the policy. It gives already a common spirit. So there's a lot of groundwork already made. But if it comes to online conferences, having people from different regions present in other regions, like Jono, who is like the JCL lead for Asia Pacific, one of the two, lives in New Zealand on the South Island, like far away from everything else. But he will present online. You will see him. Same point as you will see somebody from the US present, at the conference in Asia Pacific time zone. So it's a little bit, getting the overlap. Okay. Also events, there's also people that are always applying for like events in the US or Worlds obviously is the thing where a lot of people apply, where we actively look at it being like, okay, what's the languages you speak? What's the needs of the event? What's the needs for the community? Like, where are you from? Like, do we have a judge from there? Like, trying to get somebody in. So they also get the knowledge and be an ambassador for their community and be like, hey, it was really nice doing this international event. But obviously the more projects, the more, blog articles from different regions you have, basically, if you have a project, just looking at it and be like, oh, this is not six Americans sitting in a box, but it's like 2 Americans, maybe somebody from Brazil, it's somebody from 2 people from Europe, it's 1 person from Southeast Asia. That also those projects have like ownership together, and it's not like a bunch of white dudes sitting in a room and thinking they don't know best.
Yeah, we're
already in a very like card games, and people are usually from a more privileged position in a community in a country. Like right. It costs money, it costs like time, and that's already something that sometimes not very inclusive. But I try to do the best to make it in a way that it can be more inclusive. Not necessarily, I cannot give somebody like, here's 5K, build yourself 5 decks.
Sure,
but like include other communities, include other regions. It also comes down to things like giving opportunities to people that maybe otherwise don't have it. Like Americans, for example, like US people to be precise, have a lot of shows. Like I will not, like if I have the possibility to fly somebody to Worlds, like let's say I have 5 people I can just send there. I will most likely take people of regions that don't have shows, that are underrepresented, because if I fly 5 additional Americans over, US people, they already have a lot of shows. So trying to give those people the spotlight, that those people can also influence the community, but also can be seen. And that's let's be honest, very tricky, very complicated, and very hard to make, but I try.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. Would you have any advice for the general FAB community out there on how to keep both the player base and the judge community growing together?
As mentioned, judges are your friends and are there to help you at the show, after the show, before the show, online, whatever. I hope it never comes to the point, that we're only seen as a stepping stone or an issue. Like, and I know in some games where stores go like, judges are a burden. Like, why do we even need to get them? They're just a problem. And obviously the quality of judges being hopefully high and getting high in the future helps a lot. But as players, sometimes understanding that if you sometimes break the rules, intentionally or not, you will sometimes get a penalty and you will sometimes not like it, but it's part of a bigger picture of keeping everything fair. And sometimes it can mean that a single person not going to have the greatest day. It sadly happens, and especially if you see somebody else is having a great day. Like, for example, let's say somebody got suspended for a year, and then you don't know exactly what happened. It's tricky, but
Yeah.
sometimes we maybe will get people that did get a disqualification that was maybe, if everything would be known to everybody and everybody has telepathy, would not have been a DQ. But a lot of DQs, a lot of things, a lot of penalties, a lot of IP2s, a lot of game losses don't feel great for players, but they are part to keep the system running.
Of course, yeah. All right. I think that just about wraps up. I got one final question. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything like that you'd like to say that we didn't cover or anything?
Not really, I think. I mean, it's more the line of, I hope that the growth of the community, the growth of the game, and also the communication around it continues as it does, and that I hopefully contribute to it in a good way, and basically look back in a year to this now, like I look back now to when I started last year, and be like, I think so far has been a good year, and I hope at some point it's going to be a good 2 years, and at some point it's going to be good 3 years, and so on and so on.
All right. Thank you. I already think you're doing a fantastic job. So thank you very much for all of the effort that you put in for the judge community and even the player base out there. If anybody has any questions, how can they reach you?
The official way for having questions for a judge program is judge@fabtcg.com. That's basically, hey, you have questions about the judge program, like something specific about that. That goes there. Otherwise, my email address is klaus@legendstories.com, but that's more if it's something really personally for me. And otherwise, I am on a Discord, on the Judge Discord, and I'm hanging around. So basically, if somebody asks questions there that usually, somebody going to ask me or Josh, don't ping us directly, but we're usually lurking around in the shadows, reading things, and usually going to give our input. But there's also, for a lot of general judge questions, the Discord, a lot of capable people are there to help with general questions, general help, and it's a good place to, in general, start to basically also contact others.
Thank you so much, Klaus, for the interview and for speaking with us. And thank you to all our listeners. You can find us at IP2 Podcast on YouTube, IP2 Podcast on Twitter, and IP2 Podcast at wraith.social on Mastodon. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I mean, you can suffer now through my German sentence building, because the running joke is the longer the day goes, the more my sentence building gets German. And then sometimes it's like, why is this way? And, people will understand me, but they go like, huh?